So the first thing I want to talk about, Bill, is identifying your ideal employees. One of the things I ask shops, they go, I need a tech. Okay, to do what? Give me an example of some of the things you're looking for when you're hiring. I mean, I can hire a body, but what do I want this body to do for me?
As many of the fathers and the husbands on this call, if I'm going to run a business or if I'm going to have a job, I have to be prepared to work as hard as it needs to and as smart as I need to be able to feed my family on my sole income alone. Now, if my wife wants to work, maybe she's got a better job than I do. Nothing wrong with that. But as a man, what I'm looking for when I'm hiring a technician is somebody who's willing to put that weight on his shoulders, somebody who's willing to say, put those weights in my backpack. I'll lug it as long as I have to, because as a man, I am responsible for making sure that our children are brought up properly and that my wife does not feel like she has to go get a job and do the other full-time job called managing a household. And so when I find men, young men, that either have gotten married or they have a long-term girlfriend, and you can see they've got a look in their eyes that they're hungry, they want more responsibility, they want to be given more training, they're just a sponge. When you can model that, if you are a functioning breadwinner, this industry of ours is heavily, heavily male in the back room. Doesn't mean that we don't have brilliant female technicians. What the Auto Care Association is doing with women is fantastic. The women in auto care, there's not a bigger fan than I am. But functionally speaking, we are in an industry that the back room still 95, 96% males. And so if that's the pool that I'm working with, then I'm looking at men who have a sense of duty and sense of responsibility. A professionally built ad that explains all of the benefits that a candidate is going to be able to enjoy has to be backed up. A technician who's got 15, 20 years in the business and maybe has bounced around a couple of places, this guy's not going to answer an ad, even if it said it was $1 million behind it here. He's going to go in and he's going to find out who works there. He's going to reach out to them, social media. He's going to find out what you people do outside of work. Is there a life beyond that? Is this business functioning solely for the enjoyment of the owner? Or is this business feeding families, not just a family?
Absolutely. I have a shop right now where I've brought in two techs. They're both pretty good flat raters. They both turn 50, 60 hours apiece. But the guy that has a wife and a new baby and a house, he's the first one there and the last one to leave. The guy that has the so-so girlfriend, just about the same age, he's always wanting to leave at 4 to go play with his motorcycle. I mean, they turn the hours, but you're right. Once you have a mortgage and you've got responsibilities, it does create a lot of stability. Let's talk about who we're looking for as far as personality type and what position that they're going to do. Either you need a tech because you just lost one, or you've got a tech who's Mr. Comfort. Mr. Comfort is turning 20 to 30 hours, and that's all he'll ever do. And you can't get him to turn any more than that, regardless of what you do. You've tried cattle progs, flat rate, whatever. Nothing seems to change. Anybody out there have Mr. Comfort? They're tough to change. Most of us want to hire someone who's a high producer, Mr. Aggressive. And there's good news and there's bad news with Mr. Aggressive. Mr. Aggressive usually is a high D personality, which we're going to talk about more in October. They're directive. They don't like a lot of conversations. They tend to not be super friendly. They're all about getting the work done. You say, how was your weekend? Fine. Where's the work? I'll tell you when it's done. Mr. Aggressive does not like to be told what to do or how to do it. He just wants to know what you want. Give me work and get out of my way. And they typically are very, very effective. They turn the most hours. They tend not to like to mentor other people. That's not their thing. Sometimes, though, you'll hire a Mr. Aggressive, or you think he's going to be a Mr. Aggressive, and he turns out to be a Mr. Greatest. Mr. Aggressive is not going to spend any time telling you how wonderful he is. He ain't got time for that. But then you get the tech that has to tell everybody he's the best. And they go around the shop and they drive everybody crazy. This guy's got a toolbox that needs his own zip code. He's wearing snap-on underwear and a snap-on belt buckle. Mr. Greatest can be a great asset, but he needs a lot of recognition. Mr. Aggressive needs no recognition. Mr. Greatest, he responds a lot to trophies, medals, encouragement, recognition. Once you get past having to swallow that, that motivates this guy to produce, Mr. Greatest. Then you get Mr. Conservative. Mr. Conservative comes in one of two flavors. Either it's a tech who's hitting their 50s and they can't keep up with the technology and their knees are starting to hurt and they're just starting to freak out. They're looking for something a little more consistent because they're like, maybe I should have got out of this industry 20 years ago. But the other Mr. Conservative is someone who is a high C tech who makes a very, very good diagnostic tech, where this person wants to be absolutely right before they send the ticket back up front. Sometimes Mr. Greatest will tell you what's wrong with the car before he's even looked at it. I'll never forget, I had a guy go, it's an airflow meter. Well, how do you know that? Well, it's a common problem on these cars. Well, it had a broken timing belt, so we had no compression. Thought we'd start there. Mr. Conservative, he's the kind of guy that will do the power grounds test, that'll go the extra mile, make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. And a lot of times a shop will have Mr. Aggressives that are really good at turning out work, have one Mr. Conservative that's really good at handling the weird science projects or something like that. And I've seen some shops that just got one guy that handles the weird stuff. If you get into a car that's just a can of worms, and we all see those sometimes, then you just got one person that tackles that. Do you use that model at all, Bill?
As you're describing this, Matt, I think to myself, how many years did I torture myself looking for the guy that could fix everything? And back in, 1993, yeah, they were out there. The guy that could fix everything. Those guys aren't around anymore. And not because they're incapable. There's just too many freaking options nowadays. There's like 100x the amount of complication and models and makes out there. And so I guess the question is, it goes back to shop owner to shop owner. What do you think you're looking for out there? If you are in fact looking for somebody who's capable of fixing everything, why throw a brake job in his hands in one hand and then ask him to do an engine job in the other hand? And then you wonder why it can't be efficient, especially when there's wrong parts and warranty work and all this other stuff. Why not reduce the amount of stress in the room and simplify the amount of vehicles you take on and the amount of work that you take on and start specializing a little bit at the stuff that's more predictable? It's a great ego trip for a technician to be able to fix everything. And if you've got the right guy, Mr. Accomplished, the problem is he's not making any money, and he's not making any money for the shop either.
I've seen a lot of these guys where they're a salaried employee, because one of the things that we're starting to see with a lot of these cars is there's so much research. You get some intermittent stall that only happens going uphill in a snowstorm in third gear. So a lot of shops I'll see, they'll have production people that are paid based on production. You get Mr. Conservative who just wants a certain number and he can take care of the weird ones. And to your point, if you can avoid taking in science projects, I think there's a lot to be said for that. But at the same time, if you've got a regular customer, sometimes we do what we've got to do.
Customer walks in, he's a doctor, his wife is a nurse. I don't have this piece of paper in front of me, but this thing's branded kind of like diagnostic something or another or whatever it was. And I call him up. I said, where did you get this from? Because he comes in and it says, there's some codes, some transmission codes, and recommend a valve body on an S-Class. That's literally what he was asking for. I call him back. I said, you're a doctor. I said, would you be upset if I called you pricing out a triple bypass? He goes, well, what do you mean? I said, what I mean is, where did you get this piece of paper? We know each other well enough for me to be able to speak to him frankly like that. He goes, well, I went to AutoZone and they spit this thing out and they said, yeah, go to a neighborhood shop and tell them you need a valve body for this thing. This is what we're dealing with nowadays. If you think that it just ends at being able to fix cars, you got to fix people nowadays. You got to be able to fix the customer and get them to understand why you are the cheapest option for them, even though that estimate looks higher than anybody else's in town. You are the cheapest. And the problem is, how do I convince the fellow shop owner to understand that they're the cheapest option for that customer if they're doing good work for good money?
There's a difference in the quality of parts, and I'm not going to let my reputation go to hell because I put some cheap white box, low quality part.
So last year, we closed the shop down. Everybody went to Apex because it's our 3 years, for the aftermarket jackpot. We represent, we're the biggest part of the shareholders on the alliance. And what I tell my guys is when they're walking through the floor at Apex, every single supplier that they come across that they recognize the brand, I want them to shake those people's hands and I want them to implore them to let AutoWares know that we're willing to pay more money for better parts, because that's the cheapest way we're going to be able to deliver a product, all of us concerned. I can't tell you how many suppliers, whether it's Standard Motor Products or the guys at Dorman, they will bend over backwards for us because we're not there asking for a $9 rotor because we can't sell the $12 rotor.
Absolutely.
Those days have got to end. That's got to go.
So let's talk about Mr. New Guy. Now, here's a guy that you hire. Typically, there's a honeymoon period for the first couple weeks. Everything goes great. This is where onboarding comes in. In the old days, Bill, before you were born, back when I was a tech, we kind of had the thing where we beat up the new guy. There was a pecking order and you had to pay your dues, and you'd go have him chase a left-handed crescent wrench or a metric crescent wrench or a metric hammer and all this kind of nonsense. Those days are done. Today, we've got to make this person feel welcome. We need to assign your senior person to him to make him feel part of the team. Because again, that first 2 weeks is going to set the stage for how they interact. And the last thing I want to do is have this person start hanging around with the one guy in the company that constantly complains, because next thing you know, you're going to get two of them. I want to go back to the different personality types. So Mr. Comfort, to motivate him, you've got to take him out of his comfort zone. Sometimes changing the comp plan makes a difference. Sometimes giving him more free time makes a difference. I've seen some Mr. Comforts that are worthless Monday through Friday, but if you give them 4 10s on like a Monday through Thursday or a Tuesday through Friday, all of a sudden they're great. For them, free time is the single biggest issue. A couple of years ago, there was a survey of millennials across the world, and 38% of them responded they would take a 20% pay cut to work 4 days a week. So there is a certain percentage of people, free time is like their thing. That's where Mr. Comfort comes in. When I'm writing an ad for Mr. Comfort, which you'll see later, I have to write an ad addressing the ability to take vacation, have free time, enjoy your life outside the company. This is very, very important to this person. He won't respond if that's not in your ad. Mr. Aggressive, he needs to hear about how he can make money and people will stay out of his way. That's his biggest concerns. Mr. Greatest, he needs to come and be recognized for the amazing tech he is and stop being held down by other people and be able to get all he deserves. He loves that conversation. Mr. Conservative, he's looking for stability. We have state-of-the-art equipment. We take care of our people. We're looking for people long-term. And Mr. New Guy, depends on how you're going after him. If he's a newbie, like very little experience, you talk about this is a supportive environment. We're going to help you grow. We're going to help you learn, that kind of stuff. You have to understand who you're going after to understand how to tailor the ad, because there are 5 different personalities in text and one ad doesn't fit all. And you got to know who you're looking for. If I'm hiring an apprentice tech that I want to basically work with another tech, and this tech's going to start to train this guy, and he's eventually going to do a lot of the R&R stuff for a senior tech, that's a different pitch than me looking for a flat rate that's going to work by themselves. You've got to figure out what the mix is. And I can tell you that in most shops today, they're not all paying just one way. I'm seeing a lot of shops where they've got a blend of different comp plans. You've got some people on production. Typically, GSs or general service people are hourly, and then you've got some people that are like a salary plus because that's what they're looking for. And you've got to find what works for that person and for your company. But again, all that goes into searching for the right type of person. For those of you that are on this session, I thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, you're interested in recruiting. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a superstar that just turns a lot of hours and that's all they do? That's okay. But you need to be clear on that. If you're looking for an apprentice tech, that's a different animal. Are you looking for one of each? That's a different animal. It's kind of like hiring for a football team. We don't want everybody to be the quarterback. Sometimes we need wide receivers. So you got to be pretty clear on what you're hiring. And one of the things we're going to talk about next time and the time after that is here's the mistake everybody makes in looking for people and hiring, frankly. We tend to delay hiring and we tend to delay firing. I'm a big fan of, I'll give you a shot and terminate you quickly if you don't meet the role. But here's the thing. You're hiring people to fulfill a role. A job in a business is a role. It's a financial transaction where you're getting their time and their services and their enthusiasm in order to earn a certain amount of money from you. It's a role. And sometimes we hire someone and they just cannot fill the role. Either they're not willing to or they're not able to. And we keep trying to invent jobs for them to make them fit in the company. I personally think this is a mistake. During the playoffs last season, Dallas Cowboys had an extra point kicker who couldn't kick an extra point, save his life in like 3 playoff games in a row. I'd have cut him in the first time he missed it, not the third time. If you hired a quarterback and they can't throw the ball, you may love them, you may be their friend, but you can't necessarily turn them into the player you want. So remember, we hire for roles. Doesn't mean we don't love them. Doesn't mean we'll go out of our way to help them. But if they can't fulfill the role or they're not able or willing to fill the role, you really have to understand that you can't afford to have people on the payroll that don't deliver. Not everybody has to be a 60-hour person, but they have to fill the role for the position you hired them for. Don't invent jobs to keep someone on. Either train them or move on. Let's talk about why they'll come work for you. Bill, you covered a lot of that. Let's just start with some basics. The reason most employees leave, guess what? It's not money. If you look at Society of HR Managers, you look at any of this throughout history, most people do not quit a job for money. So why do they quit? The number one reason, according to the Society of HR Managers, people leave a company and go look for work elsewhere is they have a bad relationship with whoever is their immediate manager, whether it's a service advisor, service manager, whoever's working with them. And the biggest reason they leave is they don't feel appreciated. As a result, they're not engaged, so they start to feel burned out. It is a role, it is a financial transaction, but at the same time, we're also dealing with a human being that has feelings, that needs to feel part of a tribe, that needs to feel connected. And we're going to talk more about that next time we talk about the different parts of the brain, the limbic system versus the prefrontal cortex. The limbic system is the emotional center, and the prefrontal cortex is the higher level thinking person. If we're not constantly telling them how much we appreciate that, not constantly making them feel like we see value in them, they disengage. Engagement, by definition, means somebody puts in more effort than is required without being asked, willingly. That's engagement. So disengagement or not engaged is when they put in the bare minimum not to get fired. If you actually look at what causes the disengagement, in most cases, it is the lack of appreciation shown by their immediate manager. You have to constantly tell people you appreciate them. Bill, I'm married to a beautiful woman. I know you're married to the love of your life. Can you imagine coming in after a hard day's work and go, honey, I told you the day I married you, I love you. And if it ever changes, I'll send you a note. What's for dinner? Do you think at some point that would cause stress on her end? Employees need to be told that. Just thank people for coming in. If some of you guys are having issues where people are not performing well, my first suggestion, if you want to improve morale, is to be there before anyone shows up, shake everyone's hand, look them straight in the eye when they come in, whether they're productive or not, and say, listen, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for being part of my team. Do that for a week and watch what happens.
Yeah, but Matt, hang on a second here. So I was in the Marines in Vietnam, and my sergeant made me sweep the barracks for 6 months before I was even allowed to have food. And so are you telling me that I'm going to run my business and not build men that are going to have to sweep and do this kind of stuff to prove themselves to it? This is, by and large, nothing wrong with building strong-willed people that are emotional hemophiliacs. But the current generation we have, they're more about a sense of purpose and a sense of balance.
Very much so.
My own son, who's a general manager, tells me, you're out of balance. You're a workaholic because that's where you get your enjoyment from, right? I could work all day, every day, if I want, because I genuinely love what I do for a living. Does it get tired sometimes? Yes. Is it out of balance? Hell yes. And so for me to think that I can expect people to run as hard as I do is silly. There's no need for it. Why does it take a 5-day work week? Right now, we run a 5-day work week. But just because you operate a 5-day business, in our case, a 7 to 6, does that mean that I've got to have guys coming in for 5, 10-hour days? Or can I sit down with somebody and says, look, what if you decide how many hours you work? I just need 40 from you. Give me your 40. And if you've got your 40 by Thursday, have a great weekend. Imagine what that would do to somebody who maybe they're a coach for a little league team for their son or their daughter. And you'll find that at that point in time, they come in, they're not talking about, did you hear about what happened in politics? Did you hear what happened on the news? They're coming in, they're busting out work and they're getting it done. More importantly, they're a model for the other guys on the team. They're like, man, I can come in early, get the work done and leave early. So I don't have to be like the service advisors that are stuck waiting to cash out all the customers at the end of the day. Hell yeah, I'd like to be out by 4:00 in the afternoon.
Well, let's go down that path just for a second. I'm glad you brought that up. So first of all, if you have that, I was a Vietnam Marine attitude, make sure you're hiring Vietnam Marines. None of them are working on cars anymore. They're boomers. Every generation is the product of its parents. So if you actually go back to the 1930s, my parents were the 1930s World War II people. Dad was in World War II and so forth, and they went through the Great Depression. So they never gave me an allowance. The idea of getting an allowance is like getting an entitlement. Mom would wash Ziploc bags and reuse them. So they said, son, you can have anything you want as long as you're willing to work for it. So I started a lawn mowing business at 9, had employees by 11. For me, it was he who dies with the most toys wins. Do you remember that? I lived to work. I loved it. I'd be willing to work 7 days a week to buy toys I had no time to play with because that just was fun. So my son, who's 38 now, as a teenager, used to tell me, Dad, you're materialistic. All you care about is work and money. Of course, at the same time, every Friday, go, hey, Dad, I need $40. I want to go out with my friend. Yeah, I get you. So his generation, millennials, a little bit different. Boomers are basically, I think, born in 65 or earlier. They were all about work, work, work to survive. Work, work, work to live, work, work, work to have the better things. Because we came out of the 50s and 60s when we came out of the World War. America's the number one economic power in the world. We were all part of that big thing. The Xers are the smallest generation. They were the product of basically the boomers were so busy out doing everything that mom and dad were working that the Xers were latchkey kids. They typically were a small generation, didn't have a lot of brothers and sisters. They tend to like to work alone, very small generation. Those are people in their later 40s. The millennials, which is a large generation, they're kind of in their 30s. Most of the millennials graduated from college right around 2008-ish. Does anybody remember what happened on September 18th, 2008 at 5 o'clock in the afternoon?
Wall Street melted?
Wall Street melted. George W. Bush got on and said, well, all the banks are frozen. And so they entered a market where they borrowed $200,000 in debt for college degrees. We told them, hey, go get a college degree. Life's going to be better for you. They came out in the market where they had to live with mom and dad because there was no jobs available. The market tanked. So a lot of millennials tend to be minimalist. They're not as driven to have things as my generation is. It's not as important to them. My son, who's 38, doesn't even own a car. He rides his bike to his little train station to take the little train to his little place in work in Hoboken, and he's happy with that. Me, I had to have a car as soon as I got my learner's permit at 15 years old and 8 months. I had my own Chevrolet Camaro, but life's different. I have a daughter who's 24, and she is Gen Z. Gen Z is an interesting bunch because Gen Z actually graduated before COVID during one of the greatest economic booms in modern history. If you go back to really most of 2019, before COVID really came out, we were at the peak. I mean, things were booming in 2019. Manufacturing was up and so forth. So a lot of these people were very optimistic. They grew up with a lot of toys. 5-year-olds all had iPhones and they all had their iPads and they all had all the toys. Mommy and dad bought them the stuff so they didn't have to work that hard for it. The people they would follow on social media were also very flamboyant with all the stuff they had. So that generation's almost like my generation, and they want to earn stuff. They want to have stuff. Some people say, yeah, well, they're lazy. The human brain does not fully fuse together in the prefrontal cortex till you're about 25 years old. So you don't really take on a real personality until you hit about 25, 26. Your mind as a young person is Play-Doh until about that. You'll tend to adapt to whoever you're around. And this is why we send young people to war, and that's why young people chase causes and so forth. So I get some of you guys are frustrated with some of the early 20s, but once they get about 26, 27, they start to wake up, and we're starting to see them start to focus. I will say that that generation, Bill, likes a lot of free time right now. In the 20s, they're very much free time. Once you hit 30 and you start to get married and you start to think about having a family, then it becomes a lot about, I need to do whatever it takes to pay the bills. By the way, I want to read some comments. Dell wrote, I have to say many techs I know leave for money, but also head money does play into it.
What I hear and I see out in the field all the time is it's probably more on the technicians pushing the service writers like, no, we need to do this. When they have a really good service writer that's like, no, that's not what we do. Get back out there on the field. Give me a reason why we're doing this. And that is what the headbutting is. I've dealt with this for years. You know, when I service right back in mid 2000, I dealt with guys like this. They'd come up to the counter. We need all 4 oxygen sensors. Why? We need to replace the calipers. Why? Well, it's got 125,000 on it. You know, things like that. And so there's the HUD betting between me and them. Unfortunately, I ran the shop. They lost. I won. But that's just the way it goes.
We used to call it a sensor kit. Instead of spending time diagnosing, I have this problem with this one employee in one of my clients, this one tech, the shop will charge our diagnostic and he'll come back in 5 minutes after getting the ticket, go, I need more time. What do you mean you need more time? You spent 5 minutes. The sensor kit guy. I'm like, nice try.
Del, would it surprise you to say that my service advisors are not allowed to argue with our technicians? If the tech comes back and says, I need 3 hours for this caliper work and it's 2.1 in the book time, we don't argue with them.
When my technicians came up to me, I ran $1 million+ shop for years. But when they would come to me and say, hey, I don't care what Mitchell says, what book time is, here's why we need this time. I had no problem doing it. I mean, we worked on fire trucks, wood chippers, boats, motorhomes, heavy duty stuff. They know what they're talking about, and they know what they're talking about. And I believe them because of the guys I hired. I hired a lot of really good guys. I went to this job at employee number 32. When I left after 4 years, I was bringing in a replacement for me. That would have been number 87. That's how many techs I fired in those years, because I don't like to be lied to. When I ask you what you can do, tell me what you can do. Tell me what you can't do. I will book you for what you can do. But this is a problem I think a lot of shops have, is they hire somebody who can blow smoke up their ass and they can't do what they say they can do. I never put up with it. We're going to break $1 million every year. You're not going to be part of it. Goodbye. See ya.
I want to come back to that if we could, Del. You wrote something which I love, and I want to address that in a little bit if that's okay.
No problem.
You wrote, I also ran $1 million a year shop, did all the hiring. Many of the guys I fired lied in their interview. I want to come back to that. And I wanted to talk about how I've been helping clients with that problem, because what most shop owners do, and you're the exception, but what most shop owners do is they don't interview the people, they sell the job. There's a big difference.
Huge difference, Matt, huge.
It's gotten to the point, Bill, where most of my clients are having me do the final interview because I slow it down, go, whoa, let's talk about if you're a good fit for the company, and I start asking them questions. And if it doesn't add up, I don't know if you've ever done Match.com. I had to do that after my divorce, and I found the love of my life. And, I talked to them a lot on the phone. And if you didn't match what you said in person with the same thing, that was a first and last date. Great point. I want to come back to that because that is a key point, Del.
I started rebuilding engines in the 70s. I'm no rookie at this. I'm 63 years old. I've been doing this all my life. And my boss, my owner of the company, would interview with me when we would hire people. And he would look right at him and say, listen, you're going to be dealing with Del. Del runs this shop. If you can't do something, please tell us right now. We won't give you that job. We had a guy we hired. He had all the right answers, all the bells and whistles, right? And first job I gave him was to replace a distributor, put a gear on the distributor, and he couldn't get the gear to go on. And he's pissing and he's moaning. And my owner, I hear him behind me. I'm in an office up front with the glass door shut, but I hear him back there bitching. And finally I walk out. I'm like, Mark, owner was Mark. Mark, what is going on? This guy can't get the gear on. I'm telling him to turn it upside down. It's tapered. The guy looks at me and he says, your owner's full of shit. Literally what he said, your owner's full of shit. I'm like, really? So let me tell you something, Bill. If you pull that gear off and turn it upside down. Well, about this time, my owner literally shoved him out of the way, pulled it off, turned it upside down, tapped it on, looked at me and said, you know what to do. I said, Bill, you're fired. That's what we went through, is these guys that I can do everything when they couldn't do everything. In this shop, because of what we worked on, how much money we made, and the quality we wanted, done right auto, I had to fire them. I had to fire so many people. I don't understand why they lie, but this today is still what shops go through, is guys that try to blow smoke up your ass, and it's really hard to figure out who that guy is. What's your advice for these shop owners that are trying to hire these people?
You can catch that, but the interview needs to be very specific. So this is the first thing. If you want to hold on to good people, you've got to show appreciation. Bill, I know you demand a lot from your people, but I also know you go out of your way to tell them how much you love them. And I think that's very, very important. Stephen Covey used to call it depositing in the emotional bank account. When you take the time to invest in them, especially when things aren't perfect, that's when you get the loyalty back. And I think that's paid forward. Some people quit because of corporate culture. It's really important that we decide who we are and what we're about. We're not just there to fix cars. We're there to take care of customers. We're there to provide value. We're there to provide a good working environment for our people. You need to decide who you are and what you're about. This is extremely important for Gen Z and millennials. They're all about, what is this all about? What meaning does this bring to the universe? Some people will quit for career growth. A lot of people, as they start to get married and their wife wants to leave her job, and they need benefits. Some of them will leave for benefits. If you guys are having trouble finding healthcare, let me know. You can actually go to the Obamacare exchange. I wasn't a fan of Obamacare when it came out. It was a mess. But I can tell you that the exchange is the most affordable way to provide quality healthcare benefits at the lowest possible cost to the business owner. I actually get mine through the exchange, and it's really good. What you're going to find is if you go through a broker, you're going to find the broker, if they're using a certified healthcare plan, is simply taking what your people would pay directly on the exchange and marking it up $300 per person. Pay is a factor, but pay only is a factor if I can't support my lifestyle. The average home price in America is $438,000 as of this month. Holy mackerel. The average new car is $48,000. Now, hopefully you're not in that market where that's the case, but if you're paying, let's just say $20 to $25 an hour, you're probably looking for someone who has a house that's paid for, because rent, for example, my daughter just got a basic one-bedroom apartment. It's $2,000. So at some point, they have to be able to live in your community, and you got to think about that. Bill, you brought up the point about flexible work options. I've seen some shops, they're open 6 days a week, but they run multiple crews of 4 days. And one shop I know, they rotate the 4 days, and every 6 weeks, the people on the rotation end up with 5 days off in a row.
Del brought up something earlier I can't get out of my head. I wonder if that situation, Del, if that young man, I don't know how old he was, but let's just say he was in his 20s. I wonder if you could put yourself back in that room and take this young man off to the side and say, look, you just started 2 weeks ago. I want you to understand something. When I was your age, I wanted to not admit that I didn't know everything. And I want you to know, in my ripe old age of 40, 50, 60, whatever, if there's one thing I've learned, is to represent myself authentically. There have been dozens of times where I should have fired every single one of my guys that have been with me for all these years. Conversely, there's dozens of times that I deserve to be fired by them. The blessing of having these guys put up with a shop owner that was less than perfect allows me to be able to say, if I'm not perfect, how the hell can I expect them to be perfect?
For me, it was the kid's reaction. Well, the owner's full of shit. If I've hired a tech, and let's say he's never done a distributor overhaul, I mean, some people, that's not their thing.
I'm old, I have.
And I get it, me too. But I know what a Ford Fairlane looks like. I know what a carburetor is. I can rebuild a quadrijet. For you other people on the call, you'll have to look that up on the History Channel. But at the same time, if this person said, listen, I'm having a little trouble, what am I missing here? Help me out here. That's good. Then I'm going to give them more time to see how they feel. But if they're already just, you can't teach me anything, that's not a good fit.
In this situation, we tried to head this off. The guy was in his late 40s. I've done this forever. Here's the bottom line. There's a bunch of us old farts. I'm 63. I can do anything with the carburetor distributor. That's my world. Different today. All he had to do is exactly what you said. Del, I'm struggling here. What can you teach me? Instead, he was what you guys were talking about, that prima donna that knows everything. He was wrong. He had to get fired.
Absolutely. A lot of techs leave because they're frustrated with owners. And I see a lot of owners, they go to a lot of meetings and they go to a lot of events and they get very excited and they come back and they start something new and, hey, we're going to change everything. And then they don't follow through with it. This drives employees crazy. Employees are looking for consistency. Shifting priorities and shiny penny syndrome is a huge problem in our industry. We're always running for the next thing I just heard at some seminar. This drives your people nuts. And if they find out you're the kind of person that's constantly going, hey, I just heard this thing, and we're going to change all this stuff, and you don't follow through with it, you're going to lose their respect. So it's really important to understand that employees need consistency. There's actually 3 kinds of people in a shop. You've got the entrepreneur, the manager, and the tech. The entrepreneur is the person constantly breaking stuff to invent new markets. The manager's job is to take all that disarray and put it in a nice little box so we can create a product and make it consistent. And the technician's job is to do that. The problem occurs when the owners sometimes sharing this great vision they had that they haven't totally thought out with the employees. And they're like, oh my God, this is why a lot of people finally they just leave. Humans want to go to work and they want to have a consistent environment. So let's talk about creating an ideal compensation package. Flat rate is a certain amount paid per hour produced. Some people have it with a guarantee, some people do not. If you pay progressive flat rate, which I'm doing for some of my clients, it depends on the shop. I have one guy in Michigan, he's $37 an hour if you hit up to 39 hours, $40 an hour if you hit 40, 45 an hour if you hit 45, 50 if you hit 50, 55 if you hit 55, caps at 55. Some people like hourly. That's okay. But if you're going to run an hourly shop, you need a traffic cop directing traffic. You got to have somebody saying, okay, bring this one in, start on the next one. Jimmy, I need you to bring that one in. You need someone out there directing traffic. Although if they're all flat rates, sometimes you need a referee. Someone needs to be out there with a striped shirt that throws a yellow flag when they try and kill each other because somebody got a brake job. You got to decide what works for you. Millennials, because they're in their 30s, here's what they're looking for. And Bill, this goes right to what you're talking about. They want to be able to provide a middle-class income for their family, and they need to be able to live within a reasonable commute to your shop. This is a real issue right now. If rent in your area is like $2,500 a month, you're not going to get a solid person that's going to stick around for $20 an hour, typically. Now, you will in some cases get where he's married to a nurse and she makes the big money and he's just kind of doing it because she's throwing him out of the house. Keep in mind, though, that anytime the kids are sick, anytime there's a thing in school, he's the one that's going to have to go because her job's more important to the family. To Bill's point, if I can find someone where she's ready to focus on the family, typically, and ladies are doing that kind of in their 30s now, she's kind of done the career thing. She wants to focus on the family and they want to buy a home. This is a really solid person for the next 20 years, typically. You need to make time for family events. I have 3 kids. I got a 38-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 13-year-old. I have one every decade. It's what I do. And when my son was going to preschool, my youngest, my wife said, hey, you got to stop work today. You got to go watch him. He's graduating from preschool. And I'm like, what? It's at noon and you need to bring the camera. He's graduating from preschool. And I'm thinking to myself, what are the criteria for graduating from? Do you not pee your pants for a year? What's the standard here? What are you kidding me? My parents didn't come to my graduation. So anyway, we're there and it's so cute. I'm looking at all these millennial dads. I'm the old guy in the room and they're all with their phones and they're videoing all this stuff. And I'm going, I'm not videoing this. And they go, why? I said, because I'm pretty sure my kid's going to go farther than this graduation. But hey, they wanted to be able to do this. If you really want to bond with this dad, for example, let's say you're doing one-on-ones, which we'll talk about in October, which you should be with your key people. Let's say you find out that he's going, hey, Bill, my wife's really harassing me. She says I got to go watch the kids' ballet and it's in the middle of the workday week from Thursday. Most owners are like, wow, you can't take off. What if you said, oh, okay. Do you have any idea what size her shoe is? Find out for me. So the next day you bring in some ballet shoes or a gift certificate for it. Hey, make sure you send me some photos. I'll cover you. You'll gain that loyalty. Not to mention his wife's going to like you. That's the kind of stuff you can pay forward if you make it possible for them to do this kind of stuff. With Gen Z, people in their early 20s, they're a lot about free time. They give you 40 hours and they're getting out there for, maybe that's what you live with. I don't know. It depends on the part of the country you're in and what you got to deal with. One concern I have bringing younger people in is the tools are such a huge investment. It's big money. Have you guys thought about how you help this person who's already struggling to make ends meet, rent so high? How are you going to handle the tool situation? I remember in the old days, Del, if you didn't have a Snap-on or a Matco box with a whole lot of tools, if you had Craftsman in the box, we wouldn't even hire you. If we found out you had Craftsman, you'd be gone.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. But I got to tell you, my box is full of every brand there is, a lot of Craftsman, et cetera. Shops can bring in a guy. He's young. He's out of college, whatever. And create a program for him where after 2 years, we buy the tools, $1,000 investment box tools, maybe $2,000. He completes a program. He keeps doing schooling. He learns. Shop owners are benefiting from this, and we can do the same thing. This, to me, is one of the most important things, and you're hitting it. Tools are expensive. I have $50,000 of the tools in my garage. I don't use them anymore because I'm not doing that. But we need to help these young guys because they have a wife and a kid. They're
Absolutely.
not making enough money to survive. We can do this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
What Dell's describing is a balloon payment, something they can look forward to that's going to keep them there. And to your point, Dell, if I may brag for a second, my 2 ASE master technicians, I bought a Chevy Bolt in 2022 and I bought one in 2023. Each one of them drives that vehicle to work back and forth. So I cover all the maintenance. I cover the insurance on that.
I knew this.
In 5 years, I'm going to hand them over the title for $1.
I knew this, Bill. You also sent them on a cruise because they busted their ass for you. I don't know if you mentioned that tonight, but Bill, I love the way you run what you do because you get it. You get what these guys need to produce for you.
Real quick comment from Otto. I worked in a car dealership for many years on flat rate, even though the factory at times listed repair too low. Yeah, if you worked at a GM dealer, everything paid 3/10. R&R engine, 3/10, guaranteed. I started out as a GM tech. And we'd fight with the manufacturer reps to get them to change. So many shops would complain. I can recall an evaporator core, Pontiac Transport, you had to remove the windshield to get to it. One thing you got to be careful with a lot of these techs, and I'm running into this with this one person I hired, he constantly is like, he's got 5 minutes in the car, now he wants more time. No. The way it works is you go and figure out what's wrong with it. And if it took you an hour and a half, I'll get that money. But I can't go back to the customer and say, I need more money when I got nothing to offer.
Right. True that. True.
Let's talk about making your phone ring with qualified applicants, because ultimately that's the game here. How do I find the techs? How do I get them to respond? I've had amazing success at finding qualified techs for shops. A couple have been turds and we'll fire them in a week or two. But we've had really, really good success, partly because I know how to write an ad and partly because I'm doing the interview. Here's one of the ads I'm running. And if you want copies of this, it'll be in the recording. I'm happy to send them to you. Before you decide to just take this verbatim, let me talk to you, because I got to tailor it to what benefits you actually provide, what culture you really have. Because if it doesn't match it, it won't work. Help wanted, auto repair service technician. I want you to look at how the ad's written, okay? It's not must have own tools, must be ASC certified. I don't care about any of that when I'm writing the ad. I care about that when I'm doing the interview. I want to make the phone ring. So qualifications, must be willing to make a lot of money. That's Mr. Aggressive. Must be willing to take weekends off. There's Mr. Comfort. Must be willing not to show up for work on holidays. There's your Gen Z. Must be willing to take ample vacation every year. Ample could be one day. I don't know, but whatever. I'm still putting it out there. Must be willing to have loads of fun and work in a low stress environment. That last sentence is the most important for millennials. They do not like a lot of stress. Does this sound like you? Are you ready to work for a family-owned business who treats you like family instead of just being a number in a big hostile company? This is a huge difference between baby boomers and Gen Z and millennials. Baby boomers, mom and dad worked for a company their whole life. They got a pension. You grew with the company. Millennials and Gen Z, it's all about, I want to work for somebody local. They don't even like national chains. That's why the Ruby Tuesdays and the Kentucky Fried Chickens are all going broke. They like local businesses. They like to feel like they're part of the community. So that's why it plays into this. So if you're a top tech or want to become a top tech, reach out to us right away. This is the best job you'll ever have as an auto repair tech. And this opportunity is available for a very limited time. Act now, you and your family will thank you. I missed this one thing. We don't work weekends. Why? Because you're going to make so much money. You're going to want to have plenty of time after hours on weekends to enjoy it. I'm targeting multiple personalities there. Does this make the phone ring? Yes. Does this make people on Indeed send resumes? Oh, yeah. We get a ton of them. I'm finding pretty good people on Indeed right now. And one guy I just brought in from Missouri. He was a tech in Missouri and he moved to Colorado, super excited. The guy turned 60 hours first week on the job. The guy's amazing. You got to know who you're targeting. Now, let's say you're targeting a B-Tech flat rate. It's written a little bit different. Flat rate B-Tech is someone who doesn't want to get it tied up in these science projects. Give me cars and let me crank it out. Does this sound like you? Are you tired of standing around waiting for parts? You're tired of having to do a service writer's job for them. Dell, that's going to freak you out. I get it.
It indeed did. Sorry.
But remember, I'm trying to recruit somebody. And you've had enough of making less money the more you know, because you're tired of having to give all the good jobs to other techs because you're highly skilled. So you get stuck fixing weird problems that don't pay. Single biggest reason why somebody will quit one business and go to another is the more I know, the less I make. It's a huge issue. That's targeting that personality type. If you're looking for that, that's what they're looking for. They're tired of getting the weird crap where I used to turn a lot of hours and now they bring in some apprentice and he gets all the easy work and I just get crap. So that might be a good fit for you. Here's a gravy tech. Now, this one I actually wrote for a shop that does primarily tire suspension and brakes. Help wanted gravy job technician, steering, suspension, and brakes. You know, the jobs every technician fights for. This had a huge response. Obviously, you wouldn't use this ad if you're looking for a diagnostic guy. Their favorite diagnostic tool is a hammer. Here's another one, dream tire and general service job for the right technician. This is looking for someone who wants to grow. Guaranteed income, the chance to grow into a lucrative career, on the job training, and we supply the tools, and then the rest of the benefits are similar. If you're looking for an auto center manager, this is one I wrote where we got a whole bunch of applications. Help wanted dream auto center manager position for the right person, guaranteed income with high earning potential. Must be willing to make incredible money and get paid weekly. That shop did. Must be willing to have loads of fun and manage a high performance team. Are you ready to work for a family owned business? Are you tired of a dead end job and you're ready for a lucrative career? This is a big issue when you deal with people like that work for Bell Tire or any of these national chains. They're so tired of being treated like a number or nobody cares about them. That's where you're targeting here. And so that's where people reach out and go, oh, you know what? This spoke to me. And that's what they'll actually say in the ad. Wow, your ad really spoke to me. You've got to figure out who you're looking for. And then how is your business unique? If I was writing the ad for Bill's shop, it's going to be very different than for someone else's shop because Bill has certain perks he brings and a certain philosophy. And we've got to match that. Because if you can't deliver any of this or close to it, then obviously it's not a good fit. I did mention you've got to make sure to check out your Google pictures because guess what? On Google, they're going to check you out. Would you want to come work for this place? Well, if you're a Volkswagen fan, maybe.
Totally do. I've owned too many of them.
One of my first jobs as a tech was working in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco in the 1980s when all the drug culture was happening and people would drop $6,000 in a Volkswagen Bug and not even ask how much. It was a beautiful thing. Last but not least, I want to talk about interviewing. Here's the mistake everybody's making. I wanted this to be a patch that says, hi, I'm desperate. What happens most of the time is when I hear shop owners talk to these people, they start selling the job. They talk about their company. They do all the talking, talk. Oh, we've got this, we've got that. We're looking for this, blah, blah, blah. And it's all about us. And they're trying to sell the guy the job. And that's okay, maybe on the first interview, but here's what happens. My wife tells me the biggest turnoff when you're in a dating relationship is when you meet a guy and in the first 5 minutes, he wants to marry you. That just kind of says stalker. And that's what most people are doing during the interview, especially if you're desperate. And even if you're desperate and you got no text at all, I don't want to look like I'm desperate. Cindy says, desperation is not attractive. Amen. It's not. This is where a lot of my clients are having me do the final interview. I'll just share with you some of the things we do. They usually say, hi, I'm working with this coach and he has me do the final interview. I just want to make sure this is a good fit for you and for the company. Tell me about your background. Tell me about the last place you worked. What did you love about it? And if you had a Harry Potter magic wand, what would you do differently? I want to hear that because if I start hearing the last guy sucked, you're probably going to bring that with you. And what are you looking for? And talk about some jobs you've done well. Talk about some of the jobs that didn't go well. What are some of your frustrations? And I start asking about that. And, what are you looking for free time? What are you looking long-term? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? We're looking for team members who want to grow with us. We're not really looking for someone who's just a fly-by-night. I almost take it away from them and they have to kind of fight to get it back. But boy, has this weeded out a lot of losers. I just did a couple interviews last Friday for a towing company I'm working with. And I interviewed 3 people. 2 we hired, 1 we didn't. The one I didn't hire, one of the questions asked was, if we decide to offer you the position, when would you be available for work? Today, tomorrow morning? I tell those assholes, I'm out of here. Yeah, that was a no-go for me. I asked another guy, he says, listen, I need to give notice. I said, listen, I appreciate that. And if for some reason they decided to let you go after you gave notice sooner, what day would you be available to work? But when I hear, oh, I can't wait to stick it up their ass, that's a no-go. This kid was 21 years old. He's got this scruffy beard, tattoos, and a t-shirt for the interview on Zoom that says, assholes live longer. I'm like, oh my God. Needless to say, I wasn't in a hurry to give him the chance. I want to go back to something Dell was talking about. Let's say I'm the owner of the business and Dell's working for me as my service manager. Even if I like the guy, I'm going to make Dell sign off on him. If you're going to have someone join the team and he's going to work with the team, you might want to get your techs or your lead tech to interview them as well. Because if they hate this guy, it's not going to work.
He ain't fitting in. I agree.
I'm a big fan of having the ladies, the moms, the women interview them after the guy does, because ladies have radar that can determine some guy's a stalker. I don't know how you do it, ladies, but you can see it. Immediately after we hired them, this one shop I'm working with, she takes out the ladies, all the shop's girlfriends or significant others, and they just do kind of a thing together. And boy, can you find out a lot about that employee really quick. We can't ask them, are they married, what their sexual preference is, what their political thing. You can't ask any of that. But if they volunteer it because you just happen to be hanging out, you can get a lot of good information.
let me add this in here because I have a friend, her name's Rose, and I've got her last 3 jobs in the past 16, 17 years. And something I've really learned about ladies in this industry, and we need more of them. We need way more of them. But when a person walks in the door, let's say a guy walks in the door, Rose is a service writer. First thing they think is, oh, wow, look how cute she is. She sells the job. But when a lady walks in, she's like, oh, thank God it's a girl. I'm not going to get ripped off. It is the hugest thing in our industry. It is huge. And Rose, I will tell you, she's running over $1 million a year shop. She has a couple coworkers. She is the focus of that shop, the last shop, and she worked with me at Done Right Auto and RV. The girl's a badass.
I want to say one thing, and I think, Bill, feel free to please echo on this. Regardless of who you hire, think of how this will impact your team. You don't want to bring someone on the team that's a bad fit or a bad player. You know, you see that with some football players. They bring in some big shot, and this person just is so full of themselves, it just wrecks the team. At the same time, though, I can tell you, if you need work turned out, sometimes I'll hire someone that I know I'm going to get rid of in 4 months because that's what I need to do. It's still a role. You got cars and you got nobody. Sometimes you do what you do till you get the person you want.
You know, there's only 2 questions to ever answer on relationships. Where am I going and who's coming with me? And that applies in marriage. That applies in friendship. That applies in employment. If I don't know what I'm looking for, I'm going to do everything I can to dissuade myself from accepting any responsibility in the mess that I've created. And if we don't take responsibility and start honing our skill set and align ourselves with people who are professionals, consummate professionals who do this for a living, to be able to teach you all the right things to say and all the right things to do, and then live by those rules, because none of this matters if you're not the kind of person who's going to do the things that we say you're supposed to do to be a shop owner. If you're not that guy, maybe being a shop owner isn't the right thing for you in the first place. Maybe you should work for somebody who actually will allow you to make more money than if you were doing this yourself. That's a conversation for a whole other day. My claim to fame is, by some measure, maybe because I'm married to a social worker, because we've been married for almost 30 years, she drilled it into my head what authenticity looks like and how powerful it is. If you can reach people on an emotional level, they don't forget those things. They don't forget some of the things, the times when you picked them up, when they were on the verge of quitting on you and on themselves. When you can do that for somebody, there's nobody pulling them away for more money. They're just not going to go, because that's a relationship building, cementing opportunity. I pray to God that everybody on this call is going to do everything that they can to build a team that is worthy of them and makes you worthy of their time as well, because we owe them the same opportunities at life we do.
Next month is onboarding. You're going to love this because this is so important. This is where you filter out the losers and you make sure the good ones stay good ones. Thank you very much for attending.